Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my little spiritual space, my vey, or whatever you want to call it. And just because that's a pop-up tent doesn't mean it's Wiccan. It's called Working with What You've Got, which the gods and the spirits kind of appreciate. It shows, I guess, ingenuity. I don't know, my father was this way. What do you want from me? I had another experience last night. Now, I do work very hard to keep my words up because of what had happened to me that I have spoken about on this channel. And I guess something got in. And I had known it, and I thought I had chased it away. But perhaps I didn't do a good enough job. Perhaps I need to resage my home. This is one of those situations where you need to do maintenance. Constantly cleansing and purifying your area is kind of like cleaning your bedroom. It's just something you need to keep up, especially when you attract things. And sometimes they'll get in, especially whenever I'm caught up in creating, and I was on a roll creating a song. I had created one for Thor, and then I was doing a world walk and doing soul retrieval, because unfortunately for me, I am unable to get anyone to talk to me about that. And I dared to go back to the green world, the fairyland, the garden, to see if there was any bits of me there that I could reclaim, and discovered that my fairy kidnapper was no longer alive. I found it out a gross way. I was like, oh, those are eye holes. Because I had been managing to get a little bit of strength and be able to fly again. Unfortunately, it attracted attention, and this attention is very clever, and presented themselves as Wodnas, and asked for Freya to come too, and I thought it was a genuine call, and so I answered it last night, and sure enough, something came, and stood there, realized that I could no longer see, and said one phrase: I am standing before you. And then I ended up doing all the talking, and that ended up me looking it up, because Odin is associated with ecstasy, more of a fury ecstasy, except in the case of poets. I found one very obscure reference, and I wasn't even sure if what I was finding was accurate. But then I went to connect to my god spouse, because I like to do that once a day, and discovered that I was all tore up inside again. I have a lot to learn, and I'm new to some of this world walking business. I'm not new to magic, but I'm new to the level that I'm dealing with things on, shall we say. And I tend to be overly trusting, and that's what the parasites rely on. When you're alone and isolated the way I am, and can't get people to hear you or listen to you or take you seriously, that makes it a lot easier for the parasites to swoop in. Now, I've been keeping a log. It is a ODT file, and I was noticing that it was 999 pages. A quick going through, I admit I did use Highlight, which is an AI program, not Copilot. I will never recommend Copilot. That thing just gaslights. And Highlight you still gotta be careful with. But, and it started pulling up quotes where I had actually recorded things that turned into red flags. So I've got this field mine of accidental research. So I have notes here. It is a field guide to parasitic entities. I have spoken about them in the past. I have already spoken about them and glossed over them a little bit, but I'm going to do it again. One is a reminder to myself, and two, because I had been dabbling with Anglo-Saxon, and I came across an old charm against these creatures. You see, these parasites, these parasitic beings, they are not a new thing. It is true that medically, a lot of things that were mistaken for elf shot or being eaten by something or other, an addercop, whatever, addercop's just spider, but a spiritual spider, turned out to be actual medical conditions. It is true that we should take a look when we are having a problem, a stitch in our side or whatever, and not blame the fairies first, except that we shouldn't avoid them at all. I have already discussed how I feel that if someone's under siege the way I was, that instead of recommending they go see a shrink first who will medicate the symptoms away but not free them from being trapped, we should address both at the same time. But I ignored blatant red flags last night when I should have known better by now. And these are not a mental health problem, except that they're affecting my mental health by causing a lot of undue stress and duress. So I have a list here of my notes because we are indefinitely having an epidemic in this country. The shaman who helped my friend with soul retrieval and believed her, I don't deserve help, I guess. Too evil. She had observed that AI, artificial intelligence, seems to be increasing the problem. She was blaming AI. But I had observed this when the internet started getting big, that entities were using the internet to go back and forth. I know because one jumped out of my computer at me. Ugly? Oh, there's no way I could ever draw the detail for you. The wrinkles. Think Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. Now, times that with the ugly factor by 1,000. This is an old problem. You see, they used to call spirits whites. One of the words for spirits is whites. Over here on the continent, there's also Manitou. But there were other words for the more evil ones, and there's no way I will ever be able to, in just a few minutes, go through all of them, even if I knew all of them. So one of them that I found really interesting was goblin. Kobold is the German word. Goblin. Now, whenever we think of goblins, we think of these little bitty green creatures from D&D, from Dungeons & Dragons, or from some fantasy show. And unfortunately, that means that the mainstream media has overwritten what the memory tells us they should be and what they are. I had come across an old charm while looking into Anglo-Saxon and looking up things. And it was a German charm. The old charm addresses the goblin. You goblin, you kobold, you spider creature, out. And I realized as I looked more into it that goblins are not little green men with slobbery, slimy noses in horror movies or fantasy movies or on the board as you roll the dice. They're astral spiders. And that's when I realized that my problem, one of my biggest problems here that I have been dealing with since about March, are goblins. And I'm tickled by that. I shouldn't be. I should be appalled. But I'm amused. Yes, I am amused. It's amusing to me, and I do not know why. Well, on one level, I find it a little amusing because the very first time I played Dungeons and Dragons, back when it was good and you could kill spiders with silver spoons, when it was new, my character. I'm 14. Okay, I understand. I was very young, and my brother's running the scenario. And what did I do? Did I go off to slay a dragon? No. I rolled dice and made a kobold a pet. So I was like, okay, I have kobolds. How very nice. They have been plaguing me, but they do, whenever I can catch and actually see them, come as spiders. Through the course of all these months, there was a spider that would sit on my head, and that's what they do. And I used to call him my spider hat, and I thought he was my friend, but what he was doing is he was feeding. Well, I wrote and sang and practiced and worked magic. He was a fat spider when he left. He was fat. I guess I was just that tasty. So I have here in my notes a list of charms, traditional charms for chasing out these whites. I will go into and going over again how to tell them apart later. First, let's discuss how to get rid of them so that if you're an impatient sort, you can go ahead and get to the nitty-gritty. So here are some historical charms against these parasitic entities. There is the Swabian Alp charm. Yes, Alp. A-L-P. But Swabia was a region down in like the south of Germany. I didn't look on a map, so I couldn't tell you more than that. But a literal translation of one charm is Trude, 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 out of the house, out of the hole, out of the keyhole, out. Trude, you spidery one, you spidery one. When you name it Trude, 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 this is one of the old words. There's also Drude. You're naming it. And one of the charms, it says my Trude. You're putting ownership over it and putting your power over it. And each time you cast it out, you're casting it to a smaller and smaller way. So it comes out of the house, and then it has to go through a hole, possibly the door or a window, and then it has to go through the keyhole. You're diminishing its power during the three powerful times that you cast it out. And you cast it out. It's a very effective little charm, I suspect. There is a Hessian poltergeist charm, and the literal translation is, poltergeist, you spider, you thief in the night. Eat your threads, leave this place, by iron and fire, by holy word, flee forever to a distant place. So you're kicking it out pretty far. But please note, once again, it's a spider. This is the second time now that these entities have been called spiders. There is a Voigtland Mar charm. Mar is another word for these negative entities, M-A-H-R. And it gives an impossible counting task because many spirits are a little OCD, and they will compulsively count things, which is why one way to deter them is to spill rice on the floor and tell them to count the grains of rice and buy you some time to get away. So the literal translation for this is Maher, Maher, press me not, until you have counted all the wood shavings that are in this house. Now here's where I was discussing that when you say my Maher, you're putting your ownership over it. You own it. You are over it. And one way that these creatures work, understand, is that they feed off of us and our power, and we have a symbiotic relationship. And we are creatures that can weave the weird, we can weave our environment, and we can make things manifest. It's a divine light, if you want to call it that, but it's because of where we stand and how we stand. And having that diminished by telling each other that we cannot do this makes us weak against these parasites. And some might be strong enough to resist, but the little ones, not so much. Now here's one that it was because of the human family connection. This charm is meant to be spoken from a husband to his wife. You would do it to help a fellow. Alp fiend, A-L-P, the Alps. Alp fiend, Alp man, or Alp wife, here. Press no more on my wife so dear. Well, it was translated in a poem. Plague her no longer, ride her no more, till mountains and hills you have climbed o'er, till through these chains of iron you creep. No more shall you trouble her sacred sleep. And that shows the community aspect of these charms, kind of like bless you. For those of you who don't know, bless you is actually a charm, because it was once believed that when you sneezed, you were sneezing out a negative spirit, and so then you would be blessed to keep it from coming back. Here's another one. Maher, you evil spirit, I forbid you my house and farmstead, until you have climbed over all fences and fence posts, have bridged all waters, and have counted all the stars in the sky. Now this one gives the impossible counting task that I just mentioned. They might be able to cross all waters within that farmer's lifetime, and all fences and fence posts, but counting all the stars in the sky, well, that's an impossible task. Although maybe not so impossible these days, what with light pollution. So that might need to be rephrased for these modern times. Counted all the stars in the heavens, except the heavens, believe it or not, actually refers to the sky. So you're still telling it to count the stars in the sky. So I would probably rephrase it and counted all the stars in outer space. Yeah. So the reason why the Alp and the Maher and the kobolds are so tied to spiders is because they're believed to spin or weave this oppressive magic over the victim. And I can tell you from experience, that's exactly what they do. They will weave, and they'll even use you, and they use your ideas, and they get you going around in circles and dancing to their tune, and you end up spinning yourself right up while they just stand there just holding out the thread. So the charms that work best don't just banish it, they trap it within its own nature. They turn the tables back on the kobold. I think that we should go back to teaching our children these things, as I have said before. I'm fortunate that I had a lot of Mother Goose around me, and some old native lore that had survived in the family, and had access to these things. But I also come from the Gen X older time. I noticed in the 90s I started putting these things on discs for kids, and things got more mainstreamed and more monetized. Well, the lore is not only getting lost, it's getting disguised, so that you're going to have a very hard time finding it again. Go back to teaching your children these charms. They're fun finger games. They don't have to be about magic. They can just be something that you can bond together with, but then that will be in that child's memory and have them armed. Go back to telling your children stories before bed. I know that because of the way we want to compartmentalize these things, especially in some of the native families I have come across, there's well, you only tell stories in the wintertime. This was a case when it comes to being around the fire and you weren't going out and it was cold, and what were you going to do? So it was entertainment. But you still tell your children stories before bedtime. We tell our children stories about Batman and Superman and all these mainstream things, and we no longer tell our children the very important story of Rumpelstiltskin. We no longer tell our children the very important story of the brave who went to see the north wind to win the hand of his bride from his lodge. These are important stories because not only do they hold our cultural lore, but I'm learning the hard way, they hold how we can defend ourselves against a magic world that is out of control and damaged and getting worse the more and more we separate ourselves and try to do things like live in our little 15-minute cities and our little bubbles and our little heat and forget to tend the land. Now I'm going to go over something that I have discussed once before, and that is the red flags that I have learned the hard way on how to tell these bitches apart. I've identified a new one, that is the spider. A lot of people are identifying Loki, especially with spiders. And a lot of that is because of the Vat Ashlad, who is associated a little bit with the spider Vatnir. And there's a theory going on about that I'm researching right now, because it was presented to me and I'm writing that big long paper that's taking forever. It might be years before I finish it. But I'm realizing the more I see people interact on Reddit and other places, that another reason why it's being associated with spiders is because the spiders are coming. Now, a long time ago, I went to a gathering on a mountaintop, and it was before I had awakened, and it was a place full of spirits. And it was for a spiritual thing with people I will never go back to. And I parked my truck, and I stepped out of my truck, and I stepped my foot on the truck, on the soil, and immediately was hit with an astral, "Oh, you're here!" joyous greeting, so that through the entire ordeal of what was supposed to be a nice weekend, I spent getting chased and watched by spirits. The last day was the day of the spiders. Everywhere I went, there were spiders crawling at me. I ended up standing in the middle of a creek while spiders literally were crying across the water and were on rocks and stuff trying to get to me. That's what I mean. The spiders have come. In the Lokian form, especially. In the Lokian forms where the Lokians are, they talk about how a spider came, or Loki is a spider. And some of them then start talking about, well, Loki's teaching me a lesson. He did this horrible thing. He burnt my house. No, he didn't do that. But he gave me nightmares all night long. Oh, it was to give you, shadow work to make you face. No, because you see, there is one white who feeds off of your nightmares and the terror and the feelings that you get. So the spiders have come, and Loki, poor fellow, even though in the documents, is not really associated with any animal at all. He, to quote the text, mothered Sleipnir, which there is an association with him being the surrogate mother of the beginning of a ogre witch race. But most of his animal associations are as a falcon when he borrows Freya's falcon cloak. Please note that he's borrowing a Master of Scyther's shape-shifting power. He has turned into a fly, and he has turned into a horse. Both of these are beings that travel and can travel at speeds. But so far in my research, I have not come across him turning into a spider. My experiences with Loke was him shape-shifting with me astrally as we did our things and played back when I had strength and power. Overall, it was a variety of shapes, and there was no one core thing to be associated with. The last time I saw him in an animal form was in the form of a fox. We have a lot of wicked wights that are assuming forms and shapes and faces. And I've begun to notice a trend to associate them with spiders. Well, the wicked wights that are spiders are kobolds, they're goblins, they're Maher, they're Alps. They're not Loki, they're not Odin, they're not Freya. They're not good. So let me go through my checklist here of things that I have learned the hard way. 1. Core nature and intelligence. They're smart like pigs or coyotes, which doesn't mean they're sentient. Okay, they're not. They can speak phrases to you. The entity that came to me last night said, "I stand here before you." That's all he said. Now, Wodnas, the times I interacted with him, the big time that I interacted with him, the main time, was a full conversation. Yes, I did some talking, but it was a negotiation. This was not, but there was another time in which I needed comforting, and he spoke with me. And there was another time in which I needed a warning, and so he communicated with me. They were sentient, very beneficial communications. The entity that came to me last night under Odin's face came, "I stand here before you." I ended up doing literally all the talking. And then he overlapped me, which is one way they feed. And this arises your energy. And my lips were tingling, and I was like, what is this? And I thought, well, this is Odin. He's never harmed me before, but he'd also never touched me like that before. And I did wonder about that. And then when he had what he wanted, which was, I guess, to eat, he left. And then today, I'm back down to square zero after all my hard work. So they're intelligent, and it's kind of a brute force intelligent way. They can communicate they want stuff like your cat does or your dog does. They'll grunt at you. They're persistent. This entity that came last night had been poking around for 2 days. I had chased it off several times. And by the way, I did all the things you're supposed to do, that they say to do. Declare your sovereign space. Declare that nothing that means to harm you can come. Draw up your wards. Draw your circle. Raise your weird. Say no. These pigs will root and dig endlessly, looking for perceived weaknesses, and they're also rooting through your mind to pull up stuff. In that way, they're kind of persistent hunters. Now, a spider will sit and wait and is a very patient hunter, and they spin their web. But the more active kind, the parasites that will normally assume faces, they will dig through your head and pull out stuff that you haven't even thought about in like 30 years, and they do it to create as part of their web, a connection, so you'll feel a connection to them. They need you to feel connected to them because that allows them to get their hooks in. That is the thread that they will climb down to get to you on. They're also pack hunters. For those who think, oh, but Freya was there. You don't think Freya couldn't have told that she wasn't with the real Odin? But I'll tell you what the Freya I experienced when everything was hijacked was, the fake Freya was. She was an ecstasy feeder. She was a pleasure feeder. Didn't have to be sexual energy, but that was her favorite. So when Odin was doing his thing, she was there to get the pleasure I was putting out because I was overwhelmed with his ecstasy. Now, that's what got me looking into this, is whenever it was over and I started looking into it, I started looking into Odin's ecstasy, which is normally associated with berserkers, and it's a more violent type. But I found one obscure reference of poetic ecstasy, which is more calm. And I see that more as a ecstasy in inspiration, because when I get a high when I'm on a roll, and this wasn't anything like that at all. And she was there for that. Now, I had also tried to summon Tyr because, strengthen allies, and plus I wanted to call him up to try to repair my bond with him from what all had happened, and I don't think he came. Because if the true Tyr had come, I don't think I would have had Odin and Freya in my tent. But as you might notice, I have been discussing their mask of deception off and on and kind of alluding to it. That is their primary weapon. First, they're going to go through your head and find what you relate to. And they're probably going to find something obscure so that you'll be fooled easier. Well, what is that? I've heard of that. In my case, I was already in contact with the Norse gods, and I had approached Mingoloth first. And so that was an end for some of it. But Odin did come to help me, and I greatly appreciate that. But there have been other approaches that I have not mentioned. So reading my notes, they wear faces of loved ones, of the gods, of whatever will lower your guard. But that was my mother. But Odin would never be impersonated. He would never allow it. So many excuses I've heard and read over the past year, or even seen alluded to over the years. Well, they can and they will, especially if you're going to let them. This is why being just a little bit irreverent, just a little bit enough to stand on your own 2 feet, really matters. See, they don't have their own authentic presence. So they'll hijack things that your trust signals. All they care about is getting in so they can feed. And they're going to take bits of you. They're going to take your energy. They're going to take your thoughts. I had one take my thoughts once. I was so furious. The bigger ones will take bits of your soul. They actually will cut you up and chunk you out and take bits of your soul. Which is why shamans have soul retrieval, because they have to go back to get what's left and bring it back to you. There's a communication deficit with them. This silent conversation, whereas I had said before, you'll end up doing all the talking. This is actually the most reliable way to tell if it's an imposter. From now on, if you're coming to me as an entity, you'd better be willing to hold a long-ass conversation and put up with me talking a lot. That's one thing I'll give Braggy. He was so impatient about that, but he would also talk to me. Because you see, true sovereign beings, the real Wodenaz, if he's out there, and I don't know if the real Wodenaz was the real Wodenaz that came with me, but that guy in the grotto was real. He could hold a conversation. Bragi was real. He could hold a conversation. Parasites can't. They can't. They're only pig smart. They'll stand there and let you go through the motions. And they wait for openings and they'll say some phrase they've picked up and memorized. And it's usually a very nondescript common phrase. I stand before you. I had the fake Frigg say to me, well, I don't know what to do. Can you imagine Frigg not knowing what to do? You'll get excuses. Well, it's part of your path. The one I hate. It's your soul contract. They've picked up all these phrases from bullcrap that we've built in the media and everything, and they memorize them because they know what works. And in my opinion, I think possibly they're actually tapping in your head and they're just going, okay, I need you to put out this emotion and translate it as words, and it's whatever's going to work for you. They do psychic injections. Some of the dialogue I've had with entities over the years has been through images, through metaphor, through pictures. I've never had one of the parasites. They'll show me a picture, But mostly they just stand there silent and wait for me to do my course so they can do what they want. Or to get me upset. Or to get me to do some emotion so they can feed from it. There's usually telltales, which I had mentioned in another video. Whenever my tier had been hijacked, the tier that was approached me suddenly started looking a lot more pro-Cro-Magnon than he did before. And because I was researching the theories that he was older than people think. And I had uncovered a really old memory. And then he started wearing the Flintstone Grand Poobah hat. That's a big red flag, everybody. If Tier comes to you wearing a Grand Poobah hat, ask him if he's got 8 legs. Frig's telltale was she stopped being the gracious, kind queen that I had gotten to know and became very petty and mean. And by petty and mean, I mean she was the one in the concerted effort to pull me out, to block me, to do things that would upset me, and then everybody'd come to feed. She was the queen mother feeding her little spiderlings, I guess. They pack up. They will do concerted efforts and work together because each one has a different taste. So they have one entity and they want that entity to do something, but 5 of them are hungry. They're going to do something to get those 5 reactions I need to feed out of you in one hit. I actually have begun to suspect that sometimes the main entities are feeding their young. Like, for example, with Odin and Freyja last night, the fake Odin and Freyja. Odin was causing me to put out feelings, just very embarrassing feelings, that the Freyja desires and eats. Now, I don't know if that fake Odin needed anything else from me. I don't think he did. I think he was there to feed her. Like with the fake Frigg and her brood, there would be a whole lot of effort to get me upset, and then her brood would come and feed. But she was the one that would activate a lot of it, to the point that Odin actually had tried to warn me. He's like, there's things you don't know. And he had done this wonderful symbol that I had identified as he was meaning Frigg. And I was like, I am not getting in the middle of your marital spat. And that's where the fake Frigg's falseness and the clever disguises she put out protected her, because I perceived her as Odin's wife, and I was not going to get in the middle of the two. I would not. I didn't know if that was a test. I didn't care. This pack hunting behavior works. But mostly what I see online is people discussing dealing with a single entity, and I haven't really come across any mentions at all of anybody dealing with a bunch like I've been. Maybe I'm just that tasty. They have a tactic of isolation, which I'm still experiencing because people suck. You see, they want your connections severed. As do certain covens who think I haven't figured out who they are. They will attack any connection, your connection with your parents, your connection with your spiritual leader, and not just through you to make you talk nonsense and babble or make you feel like there's no one you can turn to. And these things, they put the thoughts in just right so that if you don't know how to listen, you think it's your thought. Now, I've got to where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't normally say that, and why am I hearing it in my head as if it's my thought? And then I realize, it's not a cop, chase it off. But the people around you, they aren't educated enough, and so you end up isolated because everybody's like, well, kind of like when I was a kid and that woman was told by her spirits not to talk to me, that I was evil. They create discord with your friends, and then they'll block communication with your true divine allies. A target is easiest to take down when isolated and alone with no allies. I trust my gut. We need to learn how to discern our gut from an outer cop. Very much so. The pleasurable feed that I had mentioned, venomous ecstasy. It's a manipulation, but it's also how they feed. The alien love bite scenario, the UFO lore, one of the things that was tracked by the researchers there was that you will come and you'll be visited by a succubi or an attercop, and they'll do their thing, and they'll feed, and they'll do this tantric thing to you, and it's very pleasurable, and then you end up really wanting more. And so you're willing to let them keep feeding for more. Now, I only have had this happen to me twice so far. It's clear that the entities don't want me wanting that. As for the best, I'm glad. But I'm also not swayed by pleasure. Probably a good anime would get me to stay. A good anime. I'm going to read my note. The feed feels good. The act of feeding can be very pleasurable, and it can leave you wanting more. This is not a gift. It's not a divine blessing. Because while they're doing it, they're taking from you, and sometimes they're taking bits of your soul and setting you back spiritually. It's a predator basically injecting its prey with this euphoric toxin, and it paralyzes you. And if you're strong, like I was last night, because I was able to say, wait a minute, stop, because I started going places I didn't need to go. And I was like, no, I'm not going to say that. No, I'm not going to do that. And so the entity did not say to me, well, you're being a bad follower. It just withdrew and went away. It had what it wanted. So the feeling, so you feel good and you don't resist. And it can cause addiction. It makes you want more. And it can also make you very confused. Because aren't these good feelings only supposed to be from good entities? Well, honey, crack cocaine feels good to some people. So then there's the energetic hangover, the aftermath. When you're especially strong and you've got creatures coming to you, and you're dealing with entities and you find yourself starting to be able to do less and less and less, this is because they're taking more and more and more. It is not your soul resting. Okay, that part drives me crazy. I believed it because I trusted people to know more. It is not your soul resting when you've been attacked and you realize that you can't do anything the next day. If you're strong, you've got muscles. You don't go out and lift a 50-pound barbell and suddenly have to rest a day afterwards. You go and lift it again the next day because you're strong. If you're strong and you shine brightly, like I used to do, and you notice your light dimming, it is not your soul resting. Your soul is not tired. Your soul is being ripped apart and you are being eaten alive. Think of it as a vampire sucking your blood. You only have so much blood to give, and you're putting out more, but you're not putting it out at a fast enough pace. And if that vampire keeps going, you will die of blood loss. Whenever the adder cops are coming and feeding, and you are dimming, you are dying of soul loss, of spirit loss, of power loss. So that you become empty, hollow, drained, and in my case, a husk. When you get to husk level, you're this close to spirit death. I guess I got lucky that someone finally listened. While they're doing this, you go through this emotional turmoil, shame, your emotions are up and down, you have no control of your temper. This is not divine ecstasy. This is not Odin's influence. This is the outer cops making it where you are feedable and having you put out things for them to feed on. Do not mistake a beneficial visit for an outer cop. I can't say it enough. I can't tell myself this enough. Why don't I listen? You also can get physical symptoms, believe it or not. There is a sickness that you get from after doing a big spell work that I want to talk about at some point. But you'll get sick easier. I couldn't breathe. Whenever Loki came and had attached himself to me and was like basically over me, protecting me because of everything that was going on, I never had a problem with asthma. It was great. Wish he'd do that again. But you get weaker and sicker and tired a lot. Then they'll raise your energy and all of a sudden you're full of energy and it's like being a manic depressant, up and down, up and down, up and down. But it's not manic depression. You're being fed from and you're being harvested because you're a farm. These are not a new problem. They're an old problem that we have forgotten and people are afraid to address. And the books about magic, they'll mention them and that's as far as they'll go that I've got. There's one book out there that's supposed to be about it. It's a protection book. I don't have it yet, so I can't really talk about it to vouch about it. And our media is also masking these creatures. Wow, it's like dark over there. It's like the darkness is creeping on me as the sun is going down. The media is even masking them. Take, for example, the kobolds, the goblins, the spider wights, the adder cops. And what do we think of? Little green slimy guys with snotty noses. we need to start remembering the old things. Doesn't mean we have to go back to all of the old ways, because I personally like being allowed to drive, for example, but we need to remember, and we need to bring it back up, and we need to start stepping a little bit away from mainstream media. Or when we do go into mainstream media, we need to remember it's mainstream media. That's not really a goblin, and we do need to know the difference between a goblin and a TV goblin. And I'll be frank again. Our children need to know the difference. I was taught a lot of these differences when I was small. They were fun stories to tell. I think if I hadn't had that kind of upbringing, I would be dead right now. So thank you for coming to hear me talk weirdly. And I hope that this has been educational. Plus, I'm almost completely faded out. They're coming. The darknesses are coming. They're coming to take me away. I'm going to go inside and have a sandwich. Oh, wait. Gotta have that last sip of tea.